with the types of diabetes, the treatment therapy, that is insulin. We have discussed this in detail. Insulin drug, anti-diabetic drugs which are started in type 2 diabetic patients. Okay, so this will be dealing in details about all the anti-diabetic drugs. These are the oral anti-diabetic drugs in which you have various classes. You have sulfonylureas, glinides, bigonides, thiazolidinediones, alpha glucosidase inhibitors, GLP-1 analogs, DPP-4 inhibitors and others. In others you have dopamine agonist, amylin mimetic and dual PPAR alpha and gamma agonist. In sulfonylureas, you have two generations, the first generation and second generation, in which in first generation you have tolbutamide and chlorpropamide. These are not used. Second generation you have glipizide, gliclazide, glibenclamide and glimepiride. Okay. Now this, when I have discussed with the how there is release of we have already seen the importance of this ATP sensitive potassium channel. Okay. Now if you remember, I've told you that this same channel has receptors for sulfonylureas and glinides. Okay. So sulfonylureas will also bind to this channel. It will inhibit this channel. After inhibition, there will be depolarization of the membrane. There will be influx of calcium ions and there will be release of insulin by exocytosis. Okay. So this is the importance of this ATP sensitive potassium channel. The same thing I have explained here in the form of this flow chart. See, there is increased glucose, increased ATP and it will inhibit this ATP sensitive potassium channel. Now even sulfonylureas and glinides, even they also have the receptors on this same channel, that is ATP sensitive potassium channel. There is inhibition of this channel, therefore there is depolarization, there will be increased calcium influx and there is release of insulin. Now this is the mechanism, that is stimulation of insulin release from the beta cells of the pancreas. There is reduction in hepatic glucose production because there is decrease in glucagon levels and increase in peripheral insulin sensitivity. Pharmacokinetics, sulfonylureas are absorbed orally, well absorbed orally. They are highly bound to plasma proteins. It's more than 90% that these are bound to plasma proteins, and that is why you get lot of drug interactions with sulfonylureas because it is highly bound to plasma proteins. They have low volume of distribution. These drugs, they cross placenta and therefore they are contraindicated in pregnancy. These are metabolized in liver and eliminated through kidney. Now these are the drug doses for sulfonylureas. You have tolbutamide, chlorpropamide. These are the first generation sulfonylureas not used. The second generation which we are going to focus on, these are glibenclamide, gliclazide, glipizide and glimepiride. The doses, you can see the duration of action for chlorpropamide is 36 to 48 hours. It has very prolonged action. Whereas with other sulfonylureas, that is second generation sulfonylureas, the duration of action is about 24 hours. Okay. So you can give a once a day dosing for these drugs. The doses, glimepiride 1 to 8 milligram, glipizide 5 to 40, gliclazide 40 to 240 milligram and glibenclamide is 5 to 15 milligram. Doses will be 1 to 2 doses. Now tolbutamide, you have seen the duration is about 6 to 8 hours. it is short acting sulfonylurea, it's low potency, and hypoglycemia is less likely to occur with tolbutamide. Chlorpropamide, the duration of action is about 36 to 48 hours. There is increased risk of hypoglycemia. It increases ADH, that is antidiuretic hormone, and it has disulfiram like reaction. It can produce cholestatic jaundice. So many adverse effects and important aspects to know about chlorpropamide. Glibenclamide is potent but slow acting. Gliclazide, it has antiplatelet, antioxidant action. Okay, it may delay retinopathy and there is less weight gain compared to other sulfonylureas. Glipizide, it is fast acting. Then there is hypoglycemia and weight gain is again less likely. Glimepiride, it has more extra pancreatic action. There is less hyperinsulinemia. Now, what are the adverse effects of sulfonylureas? Hypoglycemia again is one of the very important adverse effects. Because these are they are going to release insulin into the body, so it is going to produce hypoglycemia. Second adverse effect is weight gain. Again, there is going to be increased weight gain. There is going to be increased weight in these patients with sulfonylureas, like which is seen in cases of patients who are taking insulin. Weight gain is one of the important adverse effects. There can be hypersensitivity. It has a sulfur component. Sulfonylureas have a sulfur component. Therefore, hypersensitivity is also one of the important adverse effects seen with sulfonylureas. You have chlorpropamide, which is not used, but still to know something important aspects of this drug, that is cholestatic jaundice, dilutional hyponatremia. Now, why there is dilutional hyponatremia? It is because of it increases ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and it is going to produce antabuse reaction. Okay. Next thing, it should be used with caution in patients with hepatic or renal insufficiency. Why? Because if this drug gets accumulated, it is going to produce hypoglycemia. They cross placental barrier, they can cause fetal hypoglycemia, and therefore these drugs are contraindicated in pregnancy. Now, in sulfonylureas, you have important drug interactions and you should be aware of those interactions. Now, why these interactions occur? I have already mentioned that because these are more than 90% protein bound drugs. Okay, therefore you get many displacement reactions with sulfonylureas. So there are certain drugs which are going to increase the action of sulfonylureas. There are certain drugs that are going to decrease the action of sulfonylureas. You have salicylates and sulfonamides. Now, with salicylates and sulfonamides, these drugs, they are also protein bound and they will displace sulfonylurea from their protein bound site. Naturally, now the sulfonylureas are free and they will produce its action. So these are going to increase the action of sulfonylureas. The next is cimetidine and warfarin. Okay, decreased metabolism of sulfonylureas. Eventually, there will be increased action of sulfonylureas. Now, with propranolol, you have to be very careful if the patient is taking sulfonylureas. Now, what I have told, with sulfonylureas, one of the important adverse effect is hypoglycemia. Okay, because sulfonylurea basically is under the class of oral hypoglycemic agent. Meglitinides and sulfonylureas, these are oral hypoglycemic agents. So with sulfonylurea, you have to be very careful as far as hypoglycemia is concerned. Now what happens, you know what are the symptoms of hypoglycemia? There will be fainting attacks, sweating, dizziness, palpitations. All are the symptoms of hypoglycemia. Now if the person has taken if the patient takes sulfonylurea and he gets all these symptoms, now he knows he is hypoglycemic and he will immediately consume some glucose, okay, or any sweet thing. But now the same patient if is being prescribed propranolol. What is propranolol? Propranolol is a non-selective beta blocker. So it is going to block all the beta receptors. Now if these beta receptors sorry for the technical issue. So we're discussing the drug interaction with propranolol. Now if the patient who is taking propranolol, who is being prescribed propranolol is a non-selective beta blocker, it is going to block the beta receptor. So what all are the manifestations of hypoglycemia? Like there is sweating, there is palpitations, okay, there is dizziness. All these symptoms, they will get blocked by propranolol. So it is going to mask the hypoglycemic effects which are seen because of sulfonylurea. So now the patient will not get to know that he is having that hypoglycemia. He won't take any sugar, any glucose or any sweet thing, and that will be more difficult because hypoglycemic coma is a thing which is very serious condition, and you have to be therefore very careful whenever the patient is being prescribed propranolol and the patient is on sulfonylureas. Now there are certain drugs that are going to decrease the sulfonylurea action. The drugs that will decrease the action, these are phenytoin, phenobarbital, rifampicin. Now these drugs you have already discussed in your CNS, and you know that all these drugs like phenobarbital, rifampicin, these are enzyme inducers. Now what do you mean by enzyme inducers? It means that these drugs, they are going to induce microsomal enzymes. Once these microsomal enzymes are induced, the metabolism of the drug gets increased. So whenever these drugs are given with sulfonylureas, they will induce the metabolizing enzymes, they will increase the metabolism of sulfonylureas, and thereby the action of sulfonylureas will decrease. The next drugs are corticosteroids, thiazides, furosemide and OCPs. What these drugs will do? They are going to inhibit the release of insulin. Now what will happen? Sulfonylureas are basically going to increase the release of insulin. Now if you give such kind of drugs which are going to decrease the insulin, so this is going to counteract this. These drugs are going to interfere with the action of sulfonylureas, and that is how they are going to decrease the sulfonylurea action. Now coming towards the second class of drugs, and that is glinides. In this class you have two drugs, repaglinide and nataglinide. Now what is the mechanism of action? If you remember again, it is same like sulfonylureas. Again if you remember the diagram in which you had the potassium ATP sensitive potassium channels, they carry the receptors for both sulfonylureas and glinides. Okay, so it will bind to those receptors, it is going to inhibit that channel, and there is depolarization, there is calcium influx, and there is release of insulin. Okay, now these drugs, these are basically categorized as postprandial glucose regulators, and these are particularly effective for early release of insulin after meal. Okay, postprandial glucose regulators means they are going to control the glucose levels after meals. This you will come to know because they have a shorter duration of action and quick onset. Okay, this is the advantage and key points about these drugs. The quick and short acting insulin releases. Again mind it, sulfonylureas and glinides are said to be oral hypoglycemic agents, and why it is so? Because they release insulin. The next thing is the onset of action. It is about 1 hour, duration is 4 to 5 hours. So before meals, just or with meals you consume these drugs. So these are mainly used to control postprandial hyperglycemia, because you can see the onset is 1 hour, duration is 4 to 5 hours for shorter duration. Okay. In this you have repaglinide and nataglinide. Repaglinide you give in a dose of 0.5 mg to 4 mg with meals. Nataglinide is given in a dose of 60 to 180 mg with meals. Now why you will prefer sulfonylureas, or why will you give these glinides instead of sulfonylureas? If there is sulfur allergy, sulfonylureas have a sulfur component, right? So if there are such allergic reactions, in those cases you are going to give glinides. If you want to give some insulin releasing drug, okay, or if there is an irregular meal schedule. Now the advantage which you have seen here with glinides is that these are given with meals. So whatever be the meal schedule, you can very easily give these drugs, but it becomes difficult with sulfonylureas, and in those patients who develop sulfonylureas induce late postprandial hypoglycemia, because if you remember, the duration of action with sulfonylureas is about 24 hours. That is the duration of action. So you can get late postprandial hypoglycemia also with sulfonylureas, and this won't be the case with glinides, because if you see the duration is just 4 to 5 hours. Now the adverse effect, again because this is an insulin releasing drug, the adverse effect is hypoglycemia and weight gain, which is less compared to sulfonylureas. But yes, to enumerate, these are the adverse effects, and they must be used with caution in patients of hepatic impairment. Now we come towards the next group, that is bigonides. In bigonides you have metformin and fenformin. Fenformin is not used at all. Now the drug that remains in this class is only metformin. With metformin, it will produce little or no hypoglycemia as such, okay, because it is not an insulin releaser. It has some different mechanism. It also improves the lipid profile in type 2 diabetic patients. Metformin is given in a dose of 0.5 to 2.5 gram per day in 2 to 3 divided doses. It will depend upon the patient how much will be the control of blood glucose levels. According to that, the dose is decided. So here comes the mechanism. Metformin inhibits gluconeogenesis. Okay, it is going to inhibit gluconeogenesis. It will increase the uptake of glucose by skeletal muscle. By increasing the uptake, it is going to reduce insulin resistance. Mind it, it is going to reduce insulin resistance. It will inhibit elementary absorption of glucose, and it will interfere with mitochondrial respiratory chain and promote peripheral glucose utilization. Okay, so basically it will inhibit gluconeogenesis, it will increase the uptake of glucose, it will interfere with absorption of glucose, and peripheral utilization of glucose is improved, and it is going to reduce the resistance. Therefore, this is the drug of choice, the starting therapy in patients of type 2 DM. If you remember, in the classification itself, I have mentioned that in type 2 diabetic patients, resistance is the main factor. It is not that insulin is completely absent in these patients, but there is resistance to whatever insulin is there in their body. Okay, so if we have such a drug which is going to reduce the resistance, so this is the drug of choice, the starting therapy in patients of type 2 diabetes mellitus. So whenever you diagnose a patient with type 2 DM, you start with metformin therapy, you keep on tracking the blood glucose records, and accordingly you can go on adding the drugs, or even if it is then now not controlled, then you will go with insulin therapy. But there are many drugs. You have already seen such a big list of anti-diabetic drugs that is available. Okay. Now coming to pharmacokinetics of metformin, it is taken orally, well absorbed through GIT. The characteristic is that it is not bound to plasma proteins, it is not metabolized, and it is excreted unchanged in urine. Now indications: obese type 2 diabetes. Now secondary sulfonylurea failure state. Now what do you understand by this? You are giving sulfonylurea to a patient. Primarily, initially the patient responded very well to sulfonylurea, but later on now he is not responding to sulfonylurea. So it might be that it has developed resistance to the action of insulin, whatever is being released because of sulfonylureas. So in those patients, you can start with metformin also, because metformin, it is going to decrease the resistance, and thereby the utilization of glucose is improved, and therefore you can add metformin in patients with secondary sulfonylurea failure. To reduce insulin requirements, the same thing, it is going to reduce insulin resistance. Naturally, if you reduce insulin resistance, the dose of insulin that is required will naturally come down. Okay, so to reduce the requirement of insulin, you can give metformin therapy by improving the insulin sensitivity. Now it can be combined with sulfonylureas, glitazones, insulin, and many drugs that are there in our list. Now non-diabetic use. Metformin also has a non-diabetic use, and that is PCOD, polycystic ovarian disease. In PCOD, again there is resistance. With metformin you are going to decrease the resistance, and you will improve this condition in PCOD. Now what are the adverse effects with metformin? These are anorexia, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea. It gives a metallic taste. Now there is loss of weight. Why there is loss of weight? Naturally there is anorexia, nausea, the food intake will be decreased, there is diarrhea, and there will be loss of weight. So this is also one of the benefit in type 2 diabetic patients. You can be skin rashes. Lactic acidosis as such is rare. Vitamin B12 deficiency can occur due to malabsorption, and these drugs usually do not cause hypoglycemia even in large doses, because this is not a hypoglycemic agent per se, if you remember the mechanism of action. Now the contraindications are renal failure, in which the serum creatinine value is more than 1.5, advanced liver disease, alcohol abusers, because there is a risk of lactic acidosis and in cardiac disease patient. Here comes our next class of drugs, that is thiazolidinediones, which is also called as glitazones. These drugs are basically again insulin sensitizers, means they will sensitize the peripheral cells to the action of insulin. They are not going to promote release of insulin, therefore hyperinsulinemia is not a risk. In this you have two classes, pioglitazone and rosiglitazone. Rosiglitazone has been withdrawn from the market. Now currently we have pioglitazone from this class. So here comes the mechanism in which these are selective agonists of PPAR gamma, that is peroxisome proliferated activated receptor, and they will activate the insulin responsive genes, okay, which will regulate the carbohydrate and lipid metabolism. This is going to sensitize the peripheral tissues to insulin. So here come to know how it's an insulin sensitizer. It's going to sensitize the peripheral tissues to insulin, and thereby there will be uptake of glucose by the body. It is going to increase the glucose transport into muscles, adipose tissue. It inhibits gluconeogenesis and it promotes lipogenesis. So this is the mechanism of action. You need to remember this receptor PPAR gamma, peroxisome proliferated activated receptor gamma. Hyperglycemia, hyperinsulinemia and elevated HbA1c levels are improved. Pioglitazone has no effect on LDL levels, but it decreases triglyceride and increases HDL level. Rosiglitazone has inconsistent effect on lipid profile. It increases HDL and LDL levels. These thiazolidinediones, they lead to favorable redistribution of fat. Now the pharmacokinetics, these are absorbed from GIT. Again, these are highly bound to plasma proteins. Rosiglitazone is metabolized by cytochrome P2C8, pioglitazone which is metabolized by 2C8 and 3A4. Drug interactions were less with rosi. Metabolites of rosiglitazone excreted in urine and those of pioglitazone in bile. Now the drug dose for pioglitazone is 15 to 45 mg once daily and it is given orally. For rosiglitazone it is 4 to 8 mg once daily given orally. Adverse effects with these glitazones, the prominent adverse effect is weight gain. This is again due to fluid retention and edema. It increases extracellular fluid volume. There is worsening of CHF. Why worsening? Because it is going to increase extracellular fluid volume. There is increased deposition of subcutaneous fat. Mild anemia is one of the adverse effects. It is because of hemodilution, because it increases extracellular fluid volume. Hepatotoxicity, but it is rare. Rosiglitazone, it increases risk of fractures, especially in elderly women, and the risk of bladder cancer is seen with pioglitazone. So the contraindications for the use of this glitazones is liver disease, congestive heart failure, pregnancy, lactating mother, and even in children. The next class which we are going to deal with is alpha glucosidase inhibitors. In alpha glucosidase inhibitors, we have three drugs, that is acarbose, miglitol and voglibose. In the mechanism of action, you can see here the dietary carbohydrates. These are acted upon by this amylase to get converted to oligosaccharides, disaccharides, and again these are acted by alpha glucosidase enzyme. and they get converted to monosaccharides. So the role of this alpha glucosidase enzyme is conversion of complex carbohydrates, complex starches into monosaccharides. Okay, so it is going to convert this complex thing into monosaccharides, and then there will be absorption of this glucose. But now if you give these drugs, the name itself suggests alpha glucosidase enzyme inhibitors. They are going to inhibit this enzyme which is responsible for the breakdown of this complex starches into simpler one. So if this enzyme gets inhibited, there is no such conversion from complex to simpler one. Naturally the absorption is delayed and the rise in glucose levels is also decreased. So same thing is explained here in this flow chart. You have dietary carbohydrates which are acted upon by pancreatic amylase and alpha glucosidase enzymes, which get converted to monosaccharides and then they are absorbed into the body. Now these drugs, they inhibit these alpha glucosidase enzymes. So naturally the conversion from complex starches to the simpler one, that is into monosaccharides, and thereby the absorption is reduced. This is the mechanism of action. Now we have the three drugs, acarbose, voglibose and miglitol. Acarbose is a complex oligosaccharide. It inhibits both the enzymes, glucosidase as well as alpha glucosidase as well as alpha amylase enzyme. Okay, so it is going to reduce postprandial hypoglycemia. Okay, it is going to reduce postprandial hypoglycemia without increasing insulin levels. The regular use of these drugs reduces weight. In pre-diabetes, if it is given, the occurrence of type 2 DM, hypertension and cardiac disease is also reduced. Dose for acarbose is 50 to 100 milligram 3 times a day, and it is given just before food or along with food. Because why this is important to be given with food? Because it is going to interfere with the conversion of this complex carbohydrate, complex starch into monosaccharides, and the absorption part is affected. So it's important that you give this drug with the meals. Next is voglibose. Now there are certain advantages of voglibose over acarbose and miglitol. It is 20 to 30 times more potent than acarbose. It does not affect digoxin bioavailability unlike acarbose. There is no dose adjustment required in renal impairment patients like miglitol, and it has superior tolerability. Dose for voglibose is 0.2 to 5 milligram, and again this is to be given with meals. Now coming to the adverse effects, flatulence, diarrhea and abdominal cramping is seen in these patients. Patients with IBD or colonic ulceration, IBD is inflammatory bowel disease, colonic ulceration or intestinal obstruction, you should not use this drug in these patients because of the adverse effects which you have already seen, that is flatulence, diarrhea, abdominal cramping. There is no hypoglycemia as such if it is used alone, because it is going to affect the postprandial rise in blood glucose level. Hypoglycemic patient, if this drug is combined with sulfonylureas, or the patient is taking more other drugs for lowering the blood glucose values, and if the patient suffers with hypoglycemia who is taking this alpha glucosidase inhibitors, in those patients the treatment is glucose and not sucrose. Why? Because breakdown of sucrose, again, that is also inhibited by this acarbose or any alpha glucosidase inhibitors. So be careful that hypoglycemia, if occurs in a diabetic patient who is taking acarbose, you should be particular in giving glucose and not sucrose. The next class of drug is GLP-1 analog, or you can say incretin mimetic. Now GLP-1 and GIP, these two are the incretins amongst which GLP-1 is an important incretin which is released from the gut in response to ingested glucose. GLP is glucagon like polypeptide 1. Okay. Now what is the importance of this incretins is that whenever there is glucose in the body, these incretins are released. What they will do, these incretins, they will induce insulin release, they will inhibit glucagon, they will slow gastric emptying, and they will suppress appetite. So these 4 important things you need to remember. They will induce insulin release, inhibit glucagon release, they will suppress appetite, and they are going to slow gastric emptying. This is the importance of incretins. But the only thing you need to remember, these incretins, they have very short half-life. Why? Because these incretins, they get rapidly metabolized by DPP-4 enzyme, that is dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzymes, which will be looking after this GLP-1 analogs. So in this, the drugs available are exenatide and liraglutide. Now exenatide is obtained from the salivary gland venom of Gila monster. It is orally inactive because this it is an incretin and they get metabolized by DPP-4 enzymes. It is given subcutaneously. But this exenatide is orally inactive, but it is resistant to degradation by DPP-4. It reduces post-meal glucose, and adverse effects are nausea, anorexia, diarrhea, and necrotizing pancreatitis. Exenatide also reduces weight because of the adverse effects. Okay. The next very important class of drug is DPP-4 inhibitors. In this you have list of drugs is sitagliptin, saxagliptin, vildagliptin, and linagliptin. These are orally active DPP-4 inhibitors. These are used for the treatment of type 2 diabetic patients. This is the mechanism of action. What happens whenever you take oral glucose, there is release of this incretins GLP-1 and GIP. GLP-1 is glucagon like polypeptide. Now this GLP-1, this is going to stimulate release of insulin, and it will inhibit glucagon release. Okay. And this is how insulin will reduce plasma glucose, and even glucagon is released, so naturally glucose is going to get reduced. But the only thing with incretins is that they have very short half-life. They get rapidly degraded by dipeptidyl peptidase 4 enzyme. This is DPP-4 enzyme, which are called as gliptins. So incretins get rapidly degraded into inactive peptides, and therefore this class of drug was developed which is going to inhibit this enzyme itself, that is DPP-4 enzyme is inhibited, and that is why the incretins will stay for a longer time, and you will get the actions of incretins in which there will be increased insulin release, decreased glucagon, suppresses the appetite, which these are the actions that are seen with DPP-4 inhibitors by amplifying the incretins. So the advantage with DPP-4 inhibitors, it is going to decrease pre and postprandial blood glucose, it is weight neutral, can be used in renal impairment, and the drug that can be used is linagliptin. This is a renoprotective. It has a renoprotective property. It can be used even in hepatic impairment. One more drug that can be used in hepatic impairment is sitagliptin. This can be used with insulin to reduce insulin dose. The adverse effects with DPP-4 are angioedema, acute pancreatitis, GI upset, heart failure. It is seen with saxagliptin, nasopharyngitis, and headache. SGLT2 inhibitors is one of the very important class again as far as the treatment of type 2 diabetic patients is concerned. In this we have dapagliflozin, canagliflozin, empagliflozin. Now the mechanism of action of these drugs, basically SGLT2, it is sodium glucose cotransporter. This is responsible for reabsorbing filtered glucose in the tubular lumen of the kidney. Now these drugs, they inhibit SGLT2. Once this SGLT2 is inhibited, naturally the reabsorption of glucose is reduced. Thereby there will be increased urinary glucose excretion and lower blood glucose. So mind it, SGLT2 inhibitors are going to increase the urinary glucose excretion, but that too the one which is in excess. The excess glucose is eliminated through kidney. It also decreases reabsorption of sodium and causes osmotic diuresis, reducing systolic blood pressure, so helpful in patients of hypertension. Since SGLT2 is a co-transporter, the name itself suggests sodium and glucose co-transporter. So both this sodium and glucose are eliminated through kidney. Now what all advantages are obtained with these drugs? It is weight loss, no hypoglycemia because the excess of glucose is eliminated. It improves insulin resistance and it has a diuretic effect. So because of osmotic effect, because sodium is also lost with glucose and there is diuretic effect, osmotic diuretic effect. So it is beneficial for patients of DM with hypertension. But there are certain disadvantages also with these drugs, which is polyuria and polydipsia. Polyuria is increased urination and polydipsia increased water intake. As there is polyuria, naturally it is going to lead to polydipsia. As there is lot of loss of glucose into the urine, naturally it's a source of infection. So risk of urinary tract infections and fungal infections is quite higher in patients who are taking SGLT2 inhibitors. And there is also risk of sodium loss because this channel, that is sodium glucose co-transporter, it causes loss of glucose as well as sodium both. Now these are the other agents. In other agents we have bile acid sequestrants and dopamine 2 agonist. Bile acid sequestrants, the drug is colesevelam, which decreases hepatic gluconeogenesis and it is going to increase incretin levels. Incretins, again you know, incretin will increase insulin, decrease glucagon, suppresses appetite. Advantage is it is going to decrease your pre and postprandial blood glucose, but there is a disadvantage of constipation with bile acid sequestrants. The contraindication is the increased triglyceride levels or bowel obstruction. Another drug, dopamine 2 agonist. In this you have bromocriptine. Bromocriptine will act centrally at the level of hypothalamus and it will modulate hypothalamic regulation of metabolism. It is going to decrease pre and postprandial blood glucose. Disadvantage is dizziness, syncope, and contraindication is in patients of renal and hepatic impairment. Another class of drug, that is dual PPAR alpha and gamma agonist. PPAR is peroxisome proliferated activated receptor, is alpha and gamma. If you remember, thiazolidinediones, that is the glitazones, they acted on PPAR gamma. Now you have drug which are going to act on both PPAR alpha as well as gamma. Gamma, it is going to control your blood glucose. Alpha, it is going to take care of lipid levels, that is it is going to correct your dyslipidemia, and the gamma one, that is going to control your glucose levels. In this you have two drugs, aleglitazar, which is given in a dose of 150 to 600 microgram per day, and you have saroglitazar, which is given in a dose of 2 to 4 milligram per day. The adverse drug reactions with these are again weight gain, heart failure, and bone fractures. This is one of the recent drug which has been added. Coming to the last slide, that is the recent advances. In recent advances in the treatment for diabetes, there can be gene therapy or stem cell therapy. You do some stem cell transplantation, very much beneficial in patients of type 1 DM, in which there is destruction of beta cells, which is an autoimmune disease. In them you can try for stem cell therapy, or there can be an option of pancreatic islet cell transplantation. So thank you. This was about the anti-diabetic drugs, and we have finished with the important topic of diabetes mellitus.